Just give us a quick example of somewhere where you got a cracking insight and it was actioned on and a service or a product was developed out of it.
Okay, so a couple of years ago I worked on a very interesting project in breast care, and the remit was to develop a novel post-surgery bra for women who've had mastectomies and lumpectomies. And the company didn't really know where to start with this. They knew that there was a gap, but they didn't understand the need. And the nuances there between those things are fine, but there is a big difference. Like you might see that that there might not be a product there that's serving a certain population, but in order to make your product innovative and crack that market, it actually has to meet a need. And when you start dealing with something like breast cancer, it's a very sensitive need that you're going to meet. So it's how do you go about studying that? So I spent probably about 4 months hanging out with women who had breast surgery, and that we'll talk about the challenges later of doing this. This is a massive challenge. One, I'm male. I'm between the ages of 25 and 35, and this puts me right in the firing line of somebody who couldn't possibly empathise with this at all. Now, some people would say that that's a really bad thing. In my opinion, that's a really good thing, because I get to ask all the really, really stupid questions. And it's when you're comfortable enough to ask the really dumb, stupid questions, and you're not afraid to ask the really stupid questions, that you actually learn things that people probably haven't learned before. One of the things was that I remember one day I was out having coffee with 3 women who had they had a wide local incision, and they've had a small tumour removed. So they all started the journey together, and then they became friends, as they do. This happens quite a lot in kind of patient circles. And they were out having coffee, and I was there sitting with them, and we're having the bants and laws and drinking a few coffees, having a couple of sandwiches. And I noticed that we'll call her Marie. Marie was sitting across from me, and you could see that she was kind of sweating, and she was wearing a very nice dress, and you could see that she was sweating and everything, and that she was moving around an awful lot. Now, I didn't call it out right there and then. I spoke to her later on, and I was like, Marie, what was going on at the table? You looked very uncomfortable. And she said, well, today I didn't wear my the sports bra that I usually wear after I had my surgery. And I was like, all right, so what did you wear? She said, I wore my normal underwire bra. And I was like, well, why did you do that? And she said, I'm not going to go out and wear a dress where I don't have the right shape. So I had to wear a bra that would support me, to give me the shape that I want. And I was like, well, why do you feel like that? And she was like, well, clearly body image is very important. I'm a middle-aged woman, and I want to portray my figure. And there's something that might seem obvious, okay, to some people. That wasn't obvious to me, nor would I have noticed it if I wasn't sitting there with them and engaging in their everyday, very mundane stuff that people do, like going for a coffee. But that created a design principle that created the essence of the product, was that, it shouldn't have any wire in it, should have no seams, and it should be comfortable enough and give enough shape where somebody can wear it out and not be self-conscious about their body image. So,
brilliant. That's brilliant. And it's the hidden obvious again,
Yeah, but that's it. Like, it's all about that everyday stuff, and it's getting yourself into the situation where you can observe that kind of thing. And that creates, you'll never be able to fully step into somebody else's shoes, but you can create levels of empathy. And that is certainly one, because there was she embodied that moment, she embodied that bra, and she manifested as sweating, shifting, not being comfortable in her own skin. And it's when you start thinking about embodiment and abstract concepts like this that you actually start seeing the human element in design. Like how important it is to understand those little things. Like,
great example.
Basically, it's a bit of plastic. It deploys a stent at the end, and it deploys the stent into your esophagus. And very common procedure in the States. And if you ask me about insights, where do insights come from? Structured question sets, which you're going to hear a lot about in lean and in startup mode. People will only tell you what they currently know. They'll only tell you the current solution that's out in the marketplace. So question sets are limited you can back me up in this in a minute or argue with me, but I think you'll back me up. And questions are good. There's nothing wrong with questions, but they'll just tell you needs with the current solutions. And what we're trying to do all the time is find that magical insight. And if anything is ever going to give you a magical insight, it's the ethnographic approach. Now, I will use, when I'm in a company, I use observations because they can't do ethnographics. But sometimes I can never get to see their customers. There's too much confidentiality. The salespeople won't allow it. And salespeople are the worst people anyway to do ethnographics in any kind of format. But I say you can observe and note and document and bring it back. So what actually happened with this company, they did not particularly want to do any customer interviews. So we ended up going for 3 days to New York City, met 15 surgeons, and we had 5 minutes, 10 minutes, the maximum was 15 minutes, and you're out the door. And we had a number of structured questions we asked each one of them. After surgeon number 4, we said at the very end, wrap-up question, what would be a great outcome for if we were to design a new deployment mechanism? Well, they obviously said one-handed procedure because all the others were two-handed. But on the way out the door, this guy said, sometimes I poorly deploy the stent. And close the door. We're gone, out the door. And we said, what does that mean? And we discovered then, a bit of research, very quickly done on the hop, we discovered that poorly deployed stent mean the patient who was in for a half-day local anaesthetic procedure suddenly was rushed to hospital, potentially, in for 3 days, full anaesthetic, the insurance company had to pay the bill, the reputation of this surgeon, physician certainly had to be damaged, and the hospital had an unexpected admission. So suddenly, he had given us the answers. So the next ones, we modified the questions, went in and we found, not every day, but maybe once a quarter, once at least every 6 months, one of these physicians poorly deployed the stent. Now, you've got to remember the language is really important here, and you've got to listen. The language is, doctors don't make mistakes. They might poorly deploy the stent, but they never make mistakes. And a poorly deployed stent can be quite serious or quite significant, and it can be quite challenging for the patient as well. It can, suddenly you're out of work for 3 days, etc. So that gave us the solution. So this development mechanism, they wanted it to look like a gun, out of my control, to be honest with you. But what is in it is a deployment mechanism for a stent, but you can actually go in and recapture the stent, crush it, and pull it back out. And the IP in this is straight out of SPASnet, the patent data bank, because in here is basically a Manuel Black & Decker patent that's gone out of date, but they got a new patent because it'd been, like Dyson, applied in a new situation, and it recaptures the stent. So they got global IP, and this has gained, in 4 years, it gained 20 million in profits for them. And it's down to that listening and understanding and being ready, because we didn't know what to ask. We don't know the questions sometimes. We only know the problems with the current situations, and people don't articulate lots of things about what keeps them awake at night. And that's, to me, where we did the observations, we got talking to the physicians after each of the procedures, and that's kind of what made the difference. But it was a catch-all question, and it was a throwaway comment that we could have just left. Well, that wasn't answering a question. We could have left that slip. And I've come across the same thing down in Galway, where a surgeon doing a cardio procedure was given a different French wire than what he asked to push up the tube. And he said, I hate using the wrong French wire. And that was all his comment. And then we followed up and we discovered what is the issue behind that. Because there are so many different sizes of the thinness of the gauge of the French wire. But by finding out what was his problem, what was his concern, we were able to come up with a French wire that worked across a bigger range. So less stock for the hospital to keep the NHS and the HSE happier and reduce costs. So sometimes those throwaway comments, which you pick up more so on the observational ethnographic approach, is really the magic that actually makes you then come up with a much better solution from that point of view.
Very, very interesting example. I mean, we've had a interview there where you literally observed uncomfortable behaviour, Patrick, and here where, for example, you are having a conversation.
Yeah.
And just a very loose conversation, and something just comes up at the end that kind of sparks you to think,